Claire Tomalin was among my literary editors at the beginning of what I laughingly call my career, but later on she got interested in the careers of Mary Wollstonecraft, Jane Austen, Samuel Pepys, Catherine Mansfield, and Thomas Hardy. As the author of beautifully written short biographies, she incarnates the idea of female independence. There isn't even one man who does her job better, although many try. Jane Austen was one of your first writers, wasn't she?
Well, no, Mary Wollstonecraft was my first writer.
We'll get to her, because she was the...
And then Catherine Mansfield. Jane Austen came quite late.
Yes.
I thought I could do Jane Austen because I had already written about other 18th century women writers, Mary Wollstonecraft, and about the great actress, Dora Jordan. Yeah. So I had my knowledge of the period. And when somebody said, you write about Jane Austen, I thought, well, I've been reading her all my life with my daughters and talking about her, and I could do this. But it was because I'd already sort of lived in that period.
You see what I get for not taking notes, because Jane Austen was one of the first things of yours that I read, so I see that it didn't. And Mary Wollstonecraft I knew came early, but that was about women's rights. But I wanted to talk about Jane Austen first, because the rights weren't there yet, were they?
No. And Jane Austen noticed quite sharply. yes.
Well, you noticed the way she noticed. And,
yes, I thought that she'd been presented as a gracious Georgian. I mean, really, people like Lord David Cecil, and she'd been sort of moved up a little bit socially. And really, she came from a very vulnerable level of society. Yes. Her father was a clergyman who had to do his own farming.
Lord David Cecil was the very well-connected Don, wasn't he? And he rather favoured the idea that Jane Austen might have been rather well-connected too.
Absolutely, and he didn't bother to notice that she made friends with poor women and governesses. Yes. And that she was very, very poor herself, and so poor that she could do practically nothing. When she earned her first money, she was over 30, and she said, I am rich. She had a few pounds.
It's a circumstance I want to raise, because money runs as a thread through all your books about writers, and of course it's absolutely crucial. You've got to have it, and she didn't have it, and she could have been stopped dead altogether if she'd had none at all.
I hadn't thought of money running through all my books. Yes, well, Mary Wollstonecraft, very interesting. Her grandfather was rich, a rich city man, but her father, who was brought up to be a gentleman, lost all the money horse racing and drinking. So she was in that awful situation for a girl of being in a family that's getting poorer and poorer as you grow up. And so she had to go out and earn her living. She did. She earned her living in every way that was respectably open to her, like being a governess, being a companion, running a shop, running a school.
Let's talk about what wasn't open to Jane Austen, or apparently not open, which is marriageability. Because it's one of the things the books are about. The heroine in a Jane Austen book is not the girl who plays her in the movies, usually, which is the blinding beauty, right? The heroine is not like that. The books would be meaningless if the heroine were like that. The sister might be the blinding beauty, but the narrator...
Well, Elizabeth Bennet is beautiful through her intelligent face, but beautiful, yes. I think...
Beautiful to the smart man, to the sensitive man.
Yes, but she's a beauty, I think. Yeah, and Marianne, in Sense and Sensibility, is lusciously beautiful.
But marriageability is really the driving force that's going on among the daughters in all the books, isn't it?
I think what Jane Austen was interested in was that this is the one bit of your life, if you were a woman, where you had a bit of power, where you could actually take a bit of control. You know, you've been a daughter at home, and you're going to be a wife. Once you're married, you're going to be round down with having babies and looking after your husband. But you've got these few years when you can throw your weight around a little and make your own decisions. And all the books are about that, essentially.
Well, there was a controversy recently, which will probably go on forever, about a Jane Austen portrait. Could it be her? I suppose you've been plagued by American radio programs.
It's been proved over and again that delightful painting, it's a charming painting, is not of Jane Austen.
But couldn't we deduce that anyway? Because it's a very, very attractive person, and Jane Austen couldn't have been that, could she?
Well, you take Martin Amy's view that she was a great writer because she was Jane.
But Jane Austen's books would lose their power unless they presented this, it's actually a hope to all the women in the world who aren't blinding beauties on the front page of Vogue, that there is such a thing as a beautiful intelligence and worthiness, and her heroines represent that. If you take that away by making the heroine beautiful, you've actually destroyed the texture of the book, surely.
I don't quite agree with you about that. No.
You don't agree at all, you mean?
I think Jane Austen does want to make her heroines beautiful too. She wants to give them. I mean, there is that element in Jane Austen. She wants to give the romance. She wants to give the thing everybody longs for. Every woman reading Jane Austen is to see herself while she's reading as a beautiful heroine.
Yes.
I mean, Anne Elliot is the nearest to what you say, that Anne Elliot has lost her bloom, that she's made a terrible mistake. She didn't marry the man she wanted to marry, and then Jane Austen gives her a second chance. And that's the biggest present Jane Austen makes to sad women. She's saying you can lose it and then you can find it again.
What are the physical circumstances of Jane Austen being a writer? One of the points you raise in the book is she actually had to move house one day, and it destroyed about 20 years of her career.
Well, I did marvel at the fact that because she wrote her first 3 novels when she was under 20, and they weren't published till she...
Do you know, I keep forgetting that. Why do I keep forgetting that? Because I don't want to admit that anyone that young could be that brilliant.
It's extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then they were moving about the country, and I thought, good God, how did she keep hold of them? How did she get them packed up safely and, you know, on stagecoaches and in lodgings? It is amazing to think how easily they could have been lost.
You know, I've got 2 daughters who read everything by Jane Austen before they were like 17. Formative experiences in their lives. There is a great deal you can learn, and one of the things that a woman can learn is to be watchful, is it not?
Yes, to be watchful. Watchfulness is Jane Austen's great quality. I mean, if you think of how you were meant to be in the societies she lived in, if you were a young woman, you were meant to be agreeable. You were meant to make yourself agreeable, especially to your grander neighbours, to the people who would ask you to dinners and dances and introduce you to young men. And Jane Austen clearly didn't make herself very agreeable. She was quite spiky, and she was watchful, as you say, and she was taking it all in, and she was noticing it.
And you couldn't trust the men, especially the handsome...
You can't really trust men. I mean, the lesson she gives is still true. Don't give away too much to men.
I think in your book it emerges there could have been a man for Jane. Is this right?
Well, the famous Tom Lefroy, who was the nephew of a neighbour, a beloved neighbour, Mrs. Lefroy. And what we know is the first surviving letter of Jane Austen's to her sister Cassandra, who was not at home, describes a couple of days when she dances with Tom Lefroy and she sits out and behaves badly. And it's a wonderful letter because you can tell that she's in love with him because she keeps writing about something else and then here he comes again, another mention of Tom Lefroy. And it's, to me, deeply, deeply moving, that letter, because you can, I said it's like a sponge. You can squeeze that letter, and the more you squeeze it, the more you find out about Jane Austen's life. And I gave a whole chapter to it in my book, because I just thought...
You've got your readers leaning forward saying, yes, 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 but you know it's not going to happen.
No, it doesn't happen.
And, of course, the bad behaviour wasn't bad behaviour, it was...
Of course it wasn't bad behaviour. No, it's just that Tom Lefroy couldn't marry her. She had no money, and so he had to be sent away.
In the movie, they'd probably kiss each other, and that would be wrong. It wouldn't happen, would it?
Well, in the movie that's just been made, they elope together. And then she has a change of heart. But the movie is not about Jane Austen or life. The movie is about what scriptwriters think appeals to the public.
Well, let's get to someone who is... Because you noticed already, I'm taking them in the order that I read them. And Pepys was my next... I was always a Pepys man anyway. Because I think in some ways I am Pepys. I think a lot of men are. You know, limitless energy, no morals, whatever.
If you were really Pepys, you wouldn't be talking to me now.
Or talking like this.
You wouldn't regard a woman as being intellectually worth your intellectual attention. You would be pinching me.
And yet he had these visions. You know, when he looked at Lady Castlemaine at some reception, or she was there at the King's reception, Pepys would faint with desire and adoration.
I learned from Pepys what it is to be a young man. People think Pepys was a middle-aged man. He wasn't, but it's those wigs make him look like that. He was a young man, and he tells us everything about what it's like to be inside the skin of a young man. I was completely transfixed.
Rank as a stoat and ambitious beyond belief.
Yes.
It's a great achievement that you brought that out.
And falling in love with work too. I mean, it's not just about sex, Pepys. It's about the way society is run.
If I could praise you again, and I know it's always an uncomfortable position, but this is what this.
Me, Clive.
Well, it's one of the strengths of your book is that you do admire him. You could see why other people would admire him. Pepys was really something.
Yes, he was.
He was a bit of a monster.
And he invented a form because he had no model. He started writing that diary when he was 27, and other people were writing diaries, but he didn't know they were because none of them were published. And I think when he'd been at it for a few years, he saw that he was producing a masterpiece.
One of the reasons I'm living among books now is that I felt Pepys's library. He really did love his books. It was a physical love.
He didn't arrange his books as you do by subject. He arranged them by height.
There's something
It's
wrong.
just perfectly good.
Something wrong with that, isn't
and
it?
also, he would not have more than 3,000 books in his library. So he acquired a fourth folio of Shakespeare. He sold his second one. That's the worst thing he ever did, I think.
Wrong approach, Pepys.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a moment in Pepys, I don't know whether it's in your abridgment. I read the abridgment along with the complete thing. And he's underneath a new house, or his old house, and he's digging out the privy. And under the floorboards, there's like about 1,000 years of crap. And it reminds you terribly that their times were not like our times at all. Very close to corruption and death and fire and plague.
Yes, I don't think he was doing it himself. I think he had someone come in to do it for him.
I'm very glad to hear that.
And also, they obviously they weren't quite as squeamish as we are. I mean, there are lots of stories about Elizabeth and the maid spilling the chamber pot and all the turds, and they all fall about and giggle, you know. And in fact, it's a marvellous occasion when Lady Sandwich, the Countess of Sandwich, comes to visit Pepys.
Sandwich is his big cheese protector, wasn't
yes,
it?
well, it's his cousin who's done very well at the Restoration. And Pepys comes in. Pepys is at the office across the courtyard. He comes in. He's been told Lady Sandwich has come to see him with her page and everything. And he comes into his dining room, and she is sitting on a chamber pot in the dining room, which somebody has given her because she needs it.
I know.
And Pepys, who really reveres her, she is the woman he adores, but respectfully sort of draws back. But it's sort of, you know, he just tells you this and it passes, but it doesn't, you can't quite imagine.
They were different times.
Well, it was different. It was a different world, but it was also the same world. I mean, Pepys's social rise and his professional rise, you know, the lunches with other men, the
marriage.
Sort of longing to being on the right committees, talking to the right people, exactly like the sort of thing you see.
Wondering whether you'll get away with it when you're cheating on your wife, for example, which he does.
He would go and buy a pearl necklace for Elizabeth.
In other words, giving her a sure sign that he'd been misbehaving, right? She would think, oh, another new pearl necklace, I know what that means. In other words, the privileges are all the men's, which is really part of your story. It goes on.
Not a bit of her writing survives, and we know she wrote letters to Pepys, and that is rather extraordinary, that he didn't keep any scrap.
It goes on through your books. If I don't want to hit you with these continuous themes to the point of suggesting that I'm trying to crush your achievement. I'm quite the opposite. I'm trying to open it up. But one of the continuous stories is men's privileges and women's duties.
Well, yes. I am a feminist, as all intelligent people are. I know you are too. I began wanting to write about women and women in history, and I felt that history, we're talking now about early 1970s, I thought history had been so much told from a male point of view. And so all my early books were about women, and when I went around talking about them, I would see lots and lots of women in my audience. And I still feel sort of passionately about that. The moment has passed. I mean, many people now write about women's history, and that I rejoice in that.
Well, it
really has changed.
That's got a lot to do with you. I think you're one of the most effective feminists of your time. What I'm trying to do now is segue smoothly into, for me, the biggest of the lot, which is in many ways your smallest book, which is the story of Catherine Mansfield, which haunts me. I did not get to terms with Catherine Mansfield until I read your book. I knew that she was a great writer, but I didn't know against what odds. And sick, wasn't she?
She was sick and she was brave. I think courage is her primary quality, that she was enormously brave.
Let's raise the fact that she could also be affected and impossible. I want to get to that.
She was a wild, I think she was a wild colonial girl.
She was.
She came from
terrific.
New Zealand.
She was a New Zealander. Yeah.
And she misbehaved as much as she could.
Tell me about her. There are two illnesses really out there. There's TB, and there's the clap.
Yes, gonorrhea.
Which was a serious thing, more for women than for men at the time.
Well, yes, it tended to be, because men would be diagnosed quite easily and they would sort of be expecting to get it. I did a great deal of research at the Wellcome Institute. I know a lot about...
That must have been fun.
Yes, well, I often do. But gonorrhea in women at that period, they would tend to get infected and not realise they were infected. And, I mean, Catherine Mansfield was made infertile, and she could never have a child as a result of that infection.
Go away, and it goes on. That also, all that arthritis of hers, the neuralgia.
Yes.
How old was she when she died? She was a kid.
32.
32. Would she have been as great a writer if she wasn't sick? In other words, if she hadn't been as aware of death, would she have driven her writing so to such extremes?
Yes, I think she had it in her. I think she wasn't best served by her husband, Middleton Murray.
Let's get on to Middleton Murray.
I
wish we could...
encouraged the sentimental streak and the sort of childish streak.
He's one of the few people in literary history I would like to see removed. He was not adequate to his role.
He could be a good critic, but he wasn't. It didn't work, that relationship between him and Mansfield, and it didn't work for her professionally. He was not good for her writing. I mean, the person who in a way enabled Catherine to go on writing stories when she was very ill at the end was her woman friend, Ida Baker.
Tell me about Ida.
Was her wife, you know? She said every woman needs a wife.
But was it a true, he said with his eyes rolling, relationship? I mean, that wasn't done yet, was it?
Well, it certainly was done. Of course it was done. But I doubt if it was done, because I think Catherine liked to have the adoration, and she liked Ida to tend her. But I don't think Catherine was erotically stimulated by Ida.
But Ida was...
I met Ida. She was in
I know, I was going to raise that. She was an old woman then,
She was blind and she was deaf, and she lived in a tumble-down cottage and then in the New Forest. She was extraordinary. It was really extraordinary.
I've got to ask you this. I'm looking over my shoulder here a bit. But did you actually ask Ida, did you two get it on?
No, I didn't. No. But I didn't think they had.
Yes. I think it's fairly obvious that they didn't. Actually.
I think Catherine probably did with others.
Yeah. There was a sort of...
Murray Princess, she knew.
Really?
She was young,
Oh, yes, yeah. And she used her name in a story, didn't she?
Yes.
Was Ida actually a slave, wasn't she?
She was, yes, she was. She was a bit masochistic, yes. And she adored, she worshipped Catherine. She thought she was a golden being, but she enabled her. I mean, never mind all that she was there when Middleton married in London and Catherine had to be in the south of France. Ida was there looking after her and providing the conditions for her in which she could write. And she wrote some of her Daughters of the Late Colonel and some of her very best stories.
Would any of this have worked if Catherine hadn't had 120 quid a year, which was a lot of money in those days?
From her father.
From her father.
Sir Harold Beecham.
It wouldn't have worked for a second, would it?
Well, she would have had to
had to take in washing.
Yes.
She wouldn't have earned it.
I don't think she'd have taken in washing.
She couldn't have earned it from writing, could she?
Probably not.
So that 120 quid was crucial. I mean, it's often there. I mean,
oh, you're right, of course. Everybody depends on money. Yeah. I mean, Hardy had this appalling struggle from nothing.
Let's get to him, yes. His life would have been different had an annuity, wouldn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Or if he'd had a few introductions. I mean, if you compare him with other writers of his generation who came to London to make it, they'd all either been to public school, university, they knew people, they had introductions. Henry James arrives in London, he's got £1,000 banknote from his family in his pocket, and he's got introductions to everybody who matters in the literary and academic world. Hardy arrives in London, he knows nobody. He has one cousin who's a lady's maid in Kensington and her two brothers who are carpenters. Yeah. And in a way, his life goes on being like that for a very long time.
It's a bit unfair, isn't it, to accuse him of being truckling to the well-connected and of being a snob, in fact, when in fact he's not.
He didn't truckle to them, no. He was just very flattered when in the end they took notice of him.
Well,
pretty harmless.
He'd been shut out of a lot of experience, and for better or worse, it's the experience that matters most to readers.
But my God, he actually showed readers that you could you could be completely knocked over by reading about a milkmaid who gets pregnant and a stonemason who can't get an education.
Yes.
I mean, he makes them
bold. It's bold work, is it not?
Yes, it's great work. Yes.
Will this boldness continue to be felt as such now that society, in so many ways, has changed towards the egalitarianism that he couldn't imagine?
No, of course not. Of course, the moral points he was making and the social points he was making don't need to be made anymore. But curiously, people go on reading those books, especially Tess, because Tess, in a sense, is Hardy. Hardy with breasts and beautiful eyes and a soft skin and arms.
Yes.
But she is an extraordinary character.
And the letter goes under the carpet. Let's not forget the mechanical devices. I'm a Eustacia Vi man myself.
Yes.
Return of the Native was we had to read of Hardy's when I was first a student in Sydney. I was bowled over by
It's my favourite. It's my favourite. It's the most Shakespearean, it's the most poetic of the novels, I think. Of course, she was very much disapproved of by the English critics. They thought she was an English Madame Bovary, and what could be worse than that?
But that's what we want.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
Did Hardy behave well?
In life?
Yes.
Do you mean as a husband?
Yes, that too.
Well, I would say, as someone who's married myself, that when I'm writing a book and I'm absorbed in my work, I am not a very good wife.
Yes.
Hardy wrote a lot of books and a lot of poetry, and he had to earn his living by writing, and he gave himself up to it, and he was usually rather withdrawn from his first wife while he was doing so. And he was withdrawn from his second wife while he was doing so too, because if you're a writer, that's what happens, Clive. You know that. I bet you're not always taking flowers round to prove when you're writing a book.
No, it's true, and I'm not... And I'm probably not often planning the poem about eternal love, which in Hardy's case, they tended to crop up after the first wife was dead.
Oh, well, I mean, what actually happened was after she died, he became a great poet, and he wrote a series of absolutely extraordinary poems.
In other words, he started saying what he should have said.
Yes, but it isn't like that, is it?
No.
And they had bad luck. They didn't have children.
Yeah.
And they had thought they were going to have this wonderful marriage like Robert Browning and Elizabeth Barrett. They were going to be literary pals.
There's what exactly is you're connecting the way the life was actually lived to the writing. There is a connection. The trouble with the biographical movement as a whole is it distorts the actuality. It asks us to really to substitute the life for the writing, when it's a question of illumination. You should study the life to the extent that it illuminates the work.
I think literary biography is very difficult. I mean, I've written biographies that are not literary, and they're much easier to do. Mrs. Jordan, the actress, is a book that wrote itself. I just galloped home with it. It was the material so marvellous. This great actress who bore 10 grandchildren to the King of England for having an affair with one of his sons. I mean, people. I was once talking about this at a literary dinner, and Lord Longford came up to me afterwards and said, "You made that all up, didn't you, Claire?" I said, "No, I didn't, Lord Longford. It's absolutely true and documented."
It sounds like he might have been one of her descendants.
Well, there are many of them in the House of Lords, but that is much easier. To write a literary life, the Hardy life, is a most difficult life to write, because it is extremely difficult to work your way through the novels, the poetry, and sort of slot in the life.
There are tragedies in your life, I know it. There are mine, I know that. I never don't know that. Would we do the things we do without that? You've got to have a sense of life's arbitrary awfulness. I mean, Bertrand Russell, who was a monster, said that. So you can't begin to be a realist until you realise that.
Yes, somebody said to me in an Oxford Don, he said he thought that I wrote biographies because I was obsessed with death, because of people who died in my life.
Well,
and I'm curious to live other people's lives. I'm curious to live inside someone else's skin. And in a sense, when you write a biography, of course you don't live inside their skin, but your life mingles with theirs. You become friends with them. You become very close to them. And in fact, they become part of your life forever. I mean, all the people I've written about are still with me, and I still think about them, and people ask me about them, and I feel Maybe it's an arrogant thing to say, but I feel I know them.
Let's do it again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.